I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. This is part 2 of what's going on. And how many times have you seen a group of men who are sitting around together talking about the game, talking about all kinds of things that men do together? They have their fishing buddies and their poker buddies and all of these things. Well, I have with me 3 men who are talking about issues that are vital to the survival and the development of our community, and I'm glad that they're willing to stay with us and continue this conversation. I'd like to introduce them again. Nate Clay, who is a journalist, a world traveler, political activist, and Bruce Crosby, who is the chairman of the Committee to Preserve Voting Rights, and also the son of one of my classmates, which just thrills me so much to think that I would meet a son of a person with whom I was a friend and we went to school together. So, and tell your brother, William, that I said I'd like to meet him. And then, of course, Fred Carter, he was always a mainstay on the program, because I always bring Fred in when I want to get sober about the fact that we are not doing some things that I think that we could be doing as a people. I wish there were women in this discussion, because one of the things that bothers me is that the level of dependency continues to grow. And I know that many women are not learning basic skills of homemaking. Your mother, I know, because we were raised in the same generation, knew about how to make bread from scratch. Biscuits, cornbreads, cakes of every kind, pies of every kind. Knew how to take something from its basic way that it was grown and convert it into a meal, convert a cloth into clothing, to make clothes, to make food, to make a way out of no way. That was our strong suit, because we were poor. And I don't know, Bruce, if your parents experienced what I experienced, but we lived in kitchenettes which were small. You couldn't call them an apartment. It was a one room for a family, and you shared a kitchen.
Well, that was definitely the Chicago experience of my family.
Okay.
And she did share how to make those things with all of her children, her male and her female children. So those secrets didn't die.
Okay.
You know, right?
But the thing is, we, at that point in time, we talked about our resilience. At that point in our time, we could make a way out of no way. You know, there was the WPA. I mean, the unemployment rate was astronomical. So we didn't have money, and we didn't have resources, but we were able to feed, we put food on the table. What is it?
Family.
Okay.
We had family, extended family.
Okay.
We had a safety network that we don't have now. We live sort of in isolation. We do. You recall about 8 or 9 years ago, during that hot summer in Chicago, and 700 people died.
Right.
Do you know the majority of those people who died were elderly blacks? And many of them died because they lived alone and nobody came by to even check on their welfare, their well-being. And a white professor, I think over at the University of Illinois, wrote a book about that. I saw him on Chicago Tonight, and he wanted to know why did so many black Americans in Chicago died during that heat wave. And what he found out, that the level of death in the black community was even higher in equally poor Hispanic communities. And how do you explain that? Hispanic immigrants who were just as poor or poorer did not die at the same rate that blacks did during that heat wave. And then one explanation that he could come up with in his book, and I was just fascinated listening to him on Chicago Tonight on WTTW. He said that the Hispanics didn't die at the same rate that blacks did because the Hispanic family was still intact. You didn't have the high incidence of older Hispanic men and women living alone with no one going by to check up on them. In the black community, you do have that. And these elderly blacks sat in these houses. And what is really intriguing about it, some of them even had air conditioning. They had air conditioning that died, some of them. But they were afraid to turn it on for fear they couldn't pay the bill. So they died from heat strokes during that heat wave. Family. We had family during the 30s and the 40s. When you talk about how we made it, we didn't make it because we had money. We didn't make it because we owned a few businesses. Those businesses didn't last. We made it simply because we still had extended families looking out for each other. I moved to the west side from Memphis, Tennessee. My family was part of that great migration from the south, moving to the north to escape Jim Crow. And to
on the Illinois Central train.
On the Illinois Central, but we took
Get off at
with that
12th
greasy
Street.
bag of chicken.
You get off at 12th Street.
Fried, because we couldn't afford to buy nothing.
I just want to know if you got off at 12th Street.
You know, there's a joke about that. I didn't know. We didn't get off at 12th Street, but I won't even tell the joke. But we left the South like many blacks did, with hardly a dime in our pockets. That greasy bag of fried chicken that grandmama fried.
And hard-boiled eggs.
And the idea was for a few of us to come up, get started, find a place, and bring up the rest.
Renee, how do you see us
loss of family
addressing
explains a lot of this
issue in the upcoming decade?
It's difficult to see how it will change anytime soon, because we live in a state of anomie in these urban areas. The ideal, and that may change with this economy, but the ideal is the American dream. To get your apartment soon as you can,
get your car,
move to your house, and sometimes you're the only one there in that dwelling. That's the ideal, and I think with the probable economic crash that we're facing, a lot of that will change. We will be forced to change.
We did it willingly. See,
we did it willingly.
And that's
you didn't
that's
leave
the
grandmama.
frightening thing.
You didn't put grandmama in a
The
nursing
frightening
home
thing
or
is
leave her down south on a farm by herself. That's happening.
But
which
the
is what is
frightening
happening.
thing here is that we will be forced and we won't want to.
Yeah,
in other words, somebody will have to live in somebody else's house and they won't get along because they're not welcome there, and the person is not, you know, they don't know how to live with other people because everybody's used to having their own space and their own phone and their own everything. And so now you have to share. And you have to respect other people, and you have to give other people their turn. And you know, you have to leave something in the pot. You can't eat everything because you're hungry or because you desire
That was the main reason we made it during those hard times, was family. We didn't, as you say, we didn't have money. Many of us didn't have, you know what my family used to eat for dinner on Friday night in Memphis, Tennessee? Buttermilk and cornbread.
Oh yeah, that was a
buttermilk and cornbread. That's all we could afford. No meat, no protein. Buttermilk. Nowadays, I thought about this the other day. I haven't seen a glass of buttermilk in years. Do they still make buttermilk?
Not the kind that you were drinking.
But that was our meal. We couldn't afford anything else.
And chicken on Sunday.
I didn't know what eting 3 times a day was till I joined the U.S. Navy. All of a sudden, I started picking up weight.
I'm glad you pointed out, distinguished what it was. So this model of what they call the American dream of success, which is not sustainable. I mean, you in isolation.
It's not.
You take your parents, you kick them to the curb. I mean, you put them in a home.
Or you put them in a senior citizens
you have to
housing.
You got to have an appointment before you come by there.
You
can't go to anybody's house without an appointment.
Right.
Don't drop by. This is really wild. I can't drive by the house. I have to call you first and inform you that I'm going to come by, and then you have to get an appointment. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And we have been educated away from those sustainable values again.
So what are the things you see that we need to do to re-educate us and get us back on this track?
The thing, unfortunately, the crisis presents an opportunity.
Yeah.
To take the opportunity of, we could first start around our food. I remember my parents, we came from Mississippi. My grandmother sold a farm. She bought a house on the west side. It was everybody transitioned to that place, just like the Hispanics. It was 4 and 5 of us on one floor. And we had one washroom. I don't know how we made it.
And nobody was allowed to be evicted. If your rent fell behind, when I came to the west side, they used to throw waistline parties. You hoped all the big fat people came. But we were going to find a way to help you pay your rent.
Right.
Because there was still that sense of family. We were not going to sit back and see you be evicted on the street.
Somebody got to start that conversation.
Yeah.
Somebody, instead of being so focused on all this other stuff, we need to be talking with each other about how we can collectively support each other.
Here's what I think we need to do as well. We need to take family inventory.
Yeah.
What do you know about your brother or your sister or your aunt or your cousin? What do you know about how much rent do they pay?
Yeah.
How much income do they have? How much is their light bill? How much is their gas bill? How much insurance do they have? What do they need? What condition is their house in? Is the roof leaking? We don't know how each other's getting along. Everybody is on Front Street.
That is exactly.
We're pretending that we're all doing fine. We're driving cars and we're buying things and we are a nation of consumers. But we do not, if we have a crisis, which of us can help the other of us that may be more vulnerable?
Gloria,
can you pay anybody's rent but yours?
Yeah. But Gloria, during that heat wave, I hate to beat a dead horse, but during that heat wave, there were so many lessons that could have been learned that were not, for the most of us. During that heat wave, when a lot of those black people were found dead from heat strokes, they had children who lived in nice houses or nice apartments. They had air-conditioned homes.
I can't believe
They didn't even call. During that heat wave, reading the headlines every day. People dying of heat stroke, they didn't call to check on their parents. I told a friend of mine, I was in a conversation, she has a couple of master's degrees, she's with the Board of Education, she makes $60,000, $70,000 a year. And her mother lived in one place, and she lives near Little Italy. I won't call her name, she'll know what I'm talking about. But I was talking with her about all these people, and most of them black, who were dying from these heat strokes. I said, did you call your mother? She said, my mother got air conditioning. I said, but no, did you call her and tell your mother, don't worry about paying the bill, that you will pay it, so she will turn that air conditioner on. She hadn't thought about it until I mentioned it. But she jumped on the phone and called her mother and said, Mama, turn that, don't worry about that bill. So what you're saying is absolutely right. If you got an elderly relative in particularly drastic climatic conditions come along, do you know if that person can pay their light bill, if they need to turn on an air conditioner, if they got one? Do you know that person have a fan? Do you know that? And this is a relative of yours. Whose life you could save for a few dollars.
How he's going to pay his rent? I mean, there are some things that we can just know. You know that people don't, here is a family that may have one breadwinner and there may be 4 or 5 people in this family. How are they making it?
Look,
is there something you could do?
Yeah, there's a reason. I used to be a crime reporter, Gloria.
Okay.
When I got out of journalism school in New York, Columbia University in New York. I went to grad school for journalism, and I worked at I was the first black at a white newspaper up in Niagara Falls, New York. I came back to Chicago after about 3 years. I started writing for Chicago Defender. I used to write a column, Clay Images, and I covered crime. Crime was my beat. And one of the things that I learned as a crime reporter was that one of the questions you always ask when you went out to investigate a crime, you wanted to know whether the victim or the perpetrator had a job. Mm-hmm. And I learned without any sociological studies, just based on articles I wrote about crime, mostly in the black community, it was quite apparent to me that most of the perpetrators who were committing the crime, 85% I would say, were people who were not gainfully employed, were not working. There's a strong relationship between being employed and being a victim or a perpetrator of crime. People who generally had a decent job don't commit crimes, generally speaking. People who are unemployed are the ones who are more likely to commit crimes. I experienced that over and over. And when some conservative white sociologists try to argue that this is simply a moral failing in the black community, that there's no relationship between high crime and high unemployment, that's absolute nonsense.
I think it's nonsense.
All my life in the black community, unemployment has been at like 40%.
Yeah.
I think it's nonsense to think that you can deprive people of basic necessities like food and clothing and shelter and medical attention, and then put mega markets in their midst, overflowing with commodities. I mean, you walk into these stores and they just load it with goods. I mean, you just see all kinds of clothes. Now, I'm starving. Here is a supermarket, got tomatoes rolling on down on the floor, you know.
They throwing in the garbage.
Chicken stealing.
Absolutely.
You know what? In the South during the Depression, chicken stealing became a capital offense because one of the main crimes during the Depression, poor people going out stealing chickens, stealing farm. They catch you stealing the chicken, they shoot you to death over a chicken. I mean, that was one of the main crimes during the Depression. And some of the well-known gangsters, white gangsters, that became so popular back during Depression because they were of the Robin Hood type. The poor whites virtually applauded many of these gangsters for robbing the rich, robbing the banks when they were starving themselves. They virtually applauded them. They made heroes out of them. They became cultural icons.
But who are you having dinner with tonight? Are you dining alone? When is the last time you sat down with your family and had a meal? Was it Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Was it Christmas? Was it Easter? We don't share a dinner table. So we can't be sure that everybody is eating and eating well. It may well be that the franchises are feeding the family, that the people are coming still. You got off the train with a greasy bag of chicken. Now people are going home every day
Kentucky,
with a greasy
bag of chicken.
Because nobody is cooking at home. Nobody is coming to the table on a regular basis. In fact, there are families where people come in and get a plate of food and go in this direction with it, in this room to eat it, in this place where the TV is to eat it. We need to do a family inventory to find out why it is we don't function together, why it is we are not already in a sharing mode, because when you get forced to share, then it's going to be might. You know, I'm going to get my part is going to be what people are going to say. If you're not going to just volunteer to give me some bread, then I'm going to take some bread and I may take the whole loaf. You know.
See, that goes back to re-education. I had a friend of mine that called me, and she said, Fred, I don't want to have to shoot anybody, but I don't want them to come here and steal my food. So what I got to do is go out and teach people how to grow food, because times are going to be hard. And we have been so redirected to value things
and convenience
and convenience, and that this whole go to school, be educated just to consume. You know, and we're so driven by consumption. That's our whole life, and our children, a lot of younger people, are so driven by this thing of consumption that they would do anything in order to get that object, even
we
if
set
it may.
the example for our children.
Right.
We consumed.
We set the value.
We showed them either by two ways. One, we bought stuff.
Right.
Or two, we didn't buy stuff and the people next door bought stuff and they felt deprived. But we live in a consumer society.
Right.
We see advertising all day long on television, on billboards, on the radio. Everywhere you look, somebody's selling something to you. So if you're not able to buy things, then you are in some way less, you're deficient in some way.
So it's great you said buy, because it was the way we bought that allowed us to sit down collectively and eat. And the way we bought, my parents, they would go out and buy a whole cow for the whole family. The purchasing of the food, you go back to food, how we purchase food is a lot different. When I grew up, it was not a lot of, it wasn't as many fast food restaurants in our community as it is now.
There were hardly any.
Because we have families.
Yeah, we have family.
And you starve trying to sell somebody
Gloria,
something
have
every
you
day.
heard the song by Ray Charles? I'm sure you have. The title of it was I'm Busted.
Yeah.
I love that song. I was at my favorite watering hole the other night, and just listening to the lyrics, they flow right into what we're talking about. In the song Ray Charles sings, he says, and I tried to memorize the lyrics to the song because it is so telling in terms of what we're going through now. And he says in the song, my bills are all due and the baby needs shoes, but I'm busted. I got a cow, cotton is down to a quarter of a pound, I'm busted. And I got a cow that went dry, and a hen that won't lay, a big pile of bills that get bigger each day, and the county's gonna haul my belongings away, but I'm busted. But I love that song because Ray Charles, in that song, he seems to, in a kind of, try to make humor even in dire situations. He just wants you to know he's busted. But he said, I went to my brother to ask for a loan because I was busted. My brother said, my wife is down with the flu, and I was just thinking about calling on you because I'm busted. That song is apropos of some of the times that we're facing right
in our
today.
relationships, though, Nate. We're so superficial in our relationship.
Yeah.
We are not caring for each other. When we ask somebody, how are you, we don't even wait to hear an answer. And don't let them say more than fine, because we really don't want to hear the story.
That's true.
And we're not fine. We are not okay, and we are not all right. We are vulnerable in a crisis situation, and we're not talking to each other about how we can circle the wagons, how we can do what we need to do for each other. We got way too many cars in a family. You know, how come everybody got to have a car? Why does everybody have to have their own everything? Because the children can't agree on what TV show to watch. So this one has the TV and the other one has a TV. Because we can't share.
We've been bombarded 24/7.
Yeah.
All day long, and not to do that. You don't have to share anything. Here, go get your own. You don't have to build anything. Get someone else to do it. You don't have to do anything. You can get someone else, outsource it. We outsource.
And that is what has led us to the condition this country is in today.
Outsource the family needs. So the family don't need anything. We outsource everything.
We don't make anything in this country.
You know, I'm a professional, so I don't have to do anything. I outsource my activities.
Yeah.
And here we are now in an economic climate to where a person that keys in on a keyboard can generate more money than a person that uses hand.
Or to use an even more applicable analogy, someone that knows how to do a little casino wrangling with a piece of paper, which is what has caused this housing crisis that we are now experiencing. These are speculators on Wall Street. They're the root cause of this crisis we're facing. There was no actual product involved. Nobody manufactured or sold anything. These were pieces of paper being moved around by speculators.
Well, you know, you say that. I remember some years ago, Lyndon LaRouche was raising this whole issue about derivatives.
Derivatives,
And now the issue of derivatives is what all these guys on Wall Street are concerned about.
That's how, and the derivatives are what exacerbated the decline in the price of housing. These are nothing but financial instruments whereby someone can come, you go to a bank, you get a mortgage, that bank does not keep your portfolio. They bundle all of these mortgages and then they sell them to an investment bank. The investment bank in turn put them all together, slice them up and sell them as bonds or mortgage-backed securities. And the investors, foreign investors, are buying into these mortgage-backed securities. So the original source from which this process began, the derivatives move further and further away from that source, and you got speculators who come in like snakes, and they're betting as if in a casino in Las Vegas. They're essentially betting that the prices of home will continue to rise indefinitely. And so they sell these mortgage-backed securities, not understanding that we don't call the dot-com bubble a bubble for nothing. We don't call the housing market bubble a bubble for nothing. By definition, a bubble will burst, just like a soap bubble.
But he said,
by definition,
he said all those things, Nate, and they tried to picture him as a kook.
And then this started with Reagan. This really started with Reagan. And Reagan's conservative small government movement, deregulation, taking the regulation off businesses and let the market would solve it has become the religion of those who push this notion that government is evil, that government is too big. It needs to be taken into a washroom in the bathtub and drowned. I heard one of the Rush Limbaugh types say that's what he wanted to do with big government. You see, the fact of the matter is, now, of course, John McCain and the others are singing a different tune, begging government to intervene. Government does not have, we are so in hock to the Chinese, to the Japanese, to Saudis. We don't have $700 billion to bail these folks out. Where's that money coming from?
They say
they got to borrow it.
They claim they're going to get it from the taxpayers. That's what they're saying every day,
but the fact of the matter is they are borrowing this money against what foreign investors perceive to be the utter necessity for saving this system because it's so interlocked. The economic system that we live in today is so globally interlocked.
Nate,
If
we have
fail,
to clarify this point.
Yeah.
They say they're getting it from the taxpayers, and the taxpayers
got to pay it back.
The taxpayers.
This country does not have.
The taxpayers have pension funds.
Yeah, right.
The taxpayers have savings. That's where the taxpayers' money is.
Yeah,
the
but the
taxpayers have homes.
In order to bail out these
equity in them.
institutions, they got to borrow the money, but the taxpayers will have to pay it back. They got to borrow $700 billion from the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Saudis. That's what that's how they're going to bail this system out.
But they already owe the $11 trillion deficit in the national budget is already owed to those people.
Absolutely.
So did you get a chance to see Ahmadinejad, the president?
Who spoke at the UN? No, I didn't see him, but I heard.
You didn't see him on Larry King, huh?
No, I heard he was on Larry King last night. But
if you get a chance, I mean, he was not the boogeyman that the American media have been portraying him to be. He was very calm. He was very.
He was kind of funny.
He was kind of funny.
Yeah, he was very humorous.
And he was not threatening at all to the government or to the American people. So I think that the U.S. has got a problem there because Iran and the leadership does not seem to be the evil doers or wishers that the government is trying to describe them to be.
Well, they got oil.
This government has been guilty of some of the most horrendous crimes ever recorded in the annals of human history. In 1852, Frederick Douglass was asked to give the 4th of July speech in New York. And I remember that speech so well. The title of it was... He
wasn't there, though.
In 1852, of course not. But the speech is one of the most brilliant orations in American history. And in the speech, Frederick Douglass, these liberal whites, folk who were considered liberal for their day, abolitionists, invited Douglass to give this 4th of July speech. They intended for him to sing the praises of democracy and freedom and the democratic institutions. And Frederick Douglass, I know he upset a lot of folk when he started out by saying, what to the American Negro is your 4th of July? He said, I will tell you, this is a nation that has committed crimes so barbarous that it would embarrass a nation of savages.
A nation of savages.
And he went on in that speech. If anybody has not read that speech by Frederick Douglass, 1852, they should not only read it but memorize it. It was one of the greatest orations in American history. And it upset these white liberals. He said, Frederick Douglass said, you expect me, an ex-slave, to talk about the glories of democracy? I'm still being sought for running away from slavery. I mean, it was one of the great pieces of oratory that I've ever heard in this country. He put it all in perspective in that speech. You know, you got these people who have run these financial institutions. Listen to the names: Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch, the Lehman Brothers. Do you know how the Lehman Brothers were started in 1850? You know how they started?
It was something to do with slavery, wasn't it?
The Lehman Brothers were two Jewish brothers who migrated here from Bavaria, southern Germany, in 1844. They moved to Montgomery, Alabama. They started a dry goods store. And many of the white slave masters, plantation owners, often could not afford the goods that they needed, didn't have the cash. The Lehman Brothers started accepting cotton in exchange for the farm implements, the seeds, and the other dry goods that they sold. The Lehman Brothers discovered a new way of making money. When they started accepting cash in exchange for the dry goods, they came up with the idea of becoming brokers, commodities brokers. In this instance, brokers of cotton, putting the cotton on the world market for the slave masters in the South. When the Civil War broke out, the Lehman Brothers had to leave the South, of course. They moved off and went to Manhattan and opened an office. And you know, of course, the Lehman Brothers went bankrupt just 3-4 weeks ago. Now, from 1850 until 2008, these institutions of that sort made fabulous sums of money in the beginning off the backs of slaves. In the end, the Lehman Brothers, because they were the biggest holders of these mortgage-backed securities and bonds that started to decline in value because housing prices went down. They were gamblers, in effect, betting that housing prices would always, always rise, and they lost. But the majority of people disproportionately who have lost their home are who? African Americans who have lost their home. This is what the Lehman Brothers was betting on, that these homes, these prices of the homes would continue
to skyrocket.
To skyrocket. And they bet this on the basis of these people having access to easier loans, where they dropped their standards in terms of who was eligible for a loan. And there are some commentators on the right-wing commentators, who are blaming black Americans for this crisis. I've heard them say things like, those people who too dumb to read the contracts, who signed to buy houses they should have had sense enough to know they could not afford. Well, when they talk, that's not even coded language. When they talk like that, they are blaming this on minorities, this crash. The fact of the matter is, it can only be blamed on the greed of these gamblers, these manipulators, these speculators. They're the one. Jesse Jackson did not walk up to the officials at Lehman Brothers and put a gun to their head and say, give my people loans who can't afford these loans. They made that decision just based on greed. Based on greed.
But the point back to what's not sustainable.
Yeah.
We have allowed the brokers.
Yeah.
Not only in the housing, we've allowed brokers to leverage us to make money.
That's what they did in this crash. That's what
commodities, they did. Not on and I hate to say it.
And Wall Street was built on what? Slavery.
All of the brokers.
It was built on slavery.
Have brokers not just in commodities, but if you look at the total system, we have no more direct relationship with anyone.
Yeah, yeah.
We got somebody sitting in the middle.
A middleman.
A middle person.
That's who the Lehman Brothers were.
Who was leveraging
That's who they were. That's who the Sachs.
And we praise those.
Goldman Sachs.
All the financing, it's no one has any direct relationship with, like our housing. You mentioned housing. We used to collectively, and there's still some models still in existence.
Yeah.
You look at the Amish, they knew. Maybe even some Jehovah's Witnesses doing this too. They help each other build a house.
Yeah.
There was not a broke.
The Mormons do it.
The Mormon does it. There was no banker in the middle to say, I'm going to finance your house for you. You go out and get a contractor.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leverage this over 30 years with compound interest and, like you say, escalating scale. We have to go back to sustainable economics. the value of brokers has escalated every cost factor in our lives, from food, the manufacturing cost of food. It's all the links between the food and your
before it reaches your table.
Before it reaches your table is all
the
brokers.
middleman.
The middleman. The same thing with our shoes. What it costs to make these shoes is a lot different than
what you pay.
Than what I pay. So it's the network of relationships along the supply chain that has caused us to lose our more. We used to make shoes. The shoemaker was in the neighborhood.
We invented the shoe lasting machine.
Yeah, we invented the shoe machine. We didn't have to import shoes from China. It was a broker who decided that he can manufacture in China and import back to Chicago, and along the way, each link he would add. Yeah. And he's only paying the manufacturer maybe $2 or $3, if that much.
And to show that what you're saying is so visibly correct. I was in a department store, one of the department stores that went out and came back in, and I was in this department store, and there was a lady in front of me, and she had this basket full, this shopping cart just full of stuff. Shoes were $1.98. Skirts $1.98. Blouses $1.98. Infant clothes $1.98. These were new clothing, not a thrift store. I'm standing here, I can't believe this. I went in there for one express thing, and I had this one thing, and this woman's got this cart. And it's loaded with stuff, and when she finished, not only had she bought all these items and I'm not talking about stuff that was shoddy or anything.
Shabby. I know.
$1.98, and she had a $20 rewards certificate that she had gotten because she had a super value card or something. So she walked out of there with more stuff than she could carry. And she spent about $60, which goes to show you that if those things could be sold for $1.98, that's all they had been worth in the first place.
The rest is
when
added
people
value.
was paying $40 and $50 and $20 for these items. Now,
and Gloria,
people are not even in. This store was not even. It was not. There weren't a lot of people because I don't think people actually believe the sign on the window that says 80% off. I think they think that's not in there. It's in there. Yeah. I didn't need anything, Gloria, so I didn't do no $1.98 shopping. But I'm just
Gloria,
saying.
Don't bring up the credit card industry.
Oh, please.
That is the biggest rip-off ever invented by man.
Wow. Absolutely.
And you know, Al Capone used to charge what was called illegal, and what was known as usury.
Yes.
Excessive interest on loans.
Right.
Every state in America, except 2, had laws against excessive interest charges, usury charges.
Was Illinois one of them that did?
It was North Dakota and where was in Delaware. North Dakota and Delaware still are the only states that did not have laws against usury. The credit card business, when it started taking off in the 60s, and this was a documentary on Channel 11. It's been on twice. If you ever get a chance to see it, the history of the credit card companies is fascinating and very revealing. The CEOs of these credit card companies went to Delaware and North Dakota to headquarter their businesses there. If you notice your statements you get from your credit statement, North Dakota or Delaware, you notice your statement. There's a reason for that. These were the only 2 states that did not have laws against usury. Now, Al Capone, and I have joked about this on the air, Al Capone is probably rolling over in his grave looking at what the credit card companies charge you now for interest. He said, I bet he's saying to himself, damn, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think to go to these state legislatures and bribe the legislators to drop their laws against usury, which is what the credit card company lobbyists did. They went state by state. Illinois had laws against usury. You could be put in jail for it. And these laws were spurred by the mob, because that's what Al Capone and the mob did, charge these excessive interest rates. So all the states in the nation adopted these laws but those two. And so when the credit card companies, they decided to open up operations in those states because there were no laws. But now there are no laws hardly anywhere against usury because of the lobbyists working for the credit card companies, going state by state, buying up the state legislators, letting them ride on corporate planes and expensive dinners and donations to their campaigns. And so they changed the laws. And the sky, in terms of interest rates, the sky is the limit. If you go to Marshall Field and you see this leather jacket that you want, I know how a lot of sisters, they go down there, I gotta have it. I gotta have it.
We don't have Marshall Fields anymore.
And it's not Macy's now, but I still call it Marshall Field. But you go to this is how the credit card industry works. You go to Macy's, you see this leather jacket, it says 50% off, $500, now $250. You say, wow, that's a deal. So you immediately pull out your plastic and put it on it. What you are not thinking about is that by the time you pay for that jacket, particularly if you're paying the minimum balance, you have paid 3 to 4 times what that jacket was worth. It's not a deal. It's a ripoff. And if you miss paying your light bill, one day they jack up the interest rates again. So what you have...
Isn't that interesting, Nate, that your utilities bill are part of your credit rating now?
They say that indicates that you are risky. You are risky choice. So they use any means they can to jack up the interest
if you
rates.
Have a bad credit rating.
They jack up your interest rates. This is what Al Capone, they put these credit card companies, in fact, put Al Capone to shame. I bet you Al Capone wish he had thought to start a credit card company when he was around here selling speakeasies, spilling his booze in these speakeasies. That was a stroke of genius. But it is something that has virtually imprisoned many Americans. Many Americans, Oprah Winfrey did a show about the burden. It's not just the nation, but many individual Americans are burdened with huge credit card debts they will be paying on the rest of their lives.
Nate, I got one question before this show ends. I wanted to get your thinking on it. If Barack is successful and is elected president, how do you see, will that mean there will be no black people in the United States Senate or?
Well, you look at the names that have surfaced to replace Barack. Kwame Raoul, who succeeded him in his state Senate seat. I read a piece in the Tribune last week that all of those others whose names were mentioned, Jan Schakowsky and some others who had surfaced as possible replacement, including Jesse Jackson Jr. name has surfaced as a possible replacement. But now it seems that Kwame Raoul, who is a young lawyer, who has only been there since Barack left, less than 4 years, been in the Illinois Senate. Reason that he now seems to be the odds-on favorite to succeed Barack as a U.S. senator is that his political godfather, like Barack Obama's political godfather, is Emil Jones. Emil has reportedly recommended that Blagojevich appoint a Raoul to that position. Blagojevich is in such trouble that Emil was just about his only ally down in Springfield. And so the thinking is now that Blagojevich will listen to Emil and appoint Raoul to succeed Barack
Who will
Obama.
succeed Blagojevich?
Blagojevich is in such trouble. He's obviously planning at this point to run again. He's trying to drive. It's an old political trick. You know, you start holding fundraisers 2-3 years before the next election, try to dry up all the money you can. So Lisa Madigan has been mentioned as a possible nominee, a gubernatorial candidate. She has been mentioned, and some others. But
I thought I heard that Daley's brother was
he's looking at it, and so is the guy that used to run the Board of Education here,
Paul Vallis.
Paul Vallis. And so what Blagojevich apparently is trying to do now by holding these...
Is Roland Burrs that far out of the run?
Oh, he's completely out. He's completely out. But Blagojevich is trying to scare off the Lisa Madigan and some of those others that you mentioned by holding these fundraisers, because there's still a lot of people obligated to him. And so he's holding these fundraisers even now as we speak, trying to dry up all the money. And it was with this war chest that he had initially in 2000 that he defeated Vallis. He wiped, no, it was a close election. Vallis only lost by a few percentage points, but Vallis didn't have the money that Blagojevich had. And of course, that was before Blagojevich fell out with his father-in-law, Richard Mayo, Alderman Richard Mayo. Alderman Richard Mayo leads one of the most powerful water organizations in the city, and he put his ward organization, and he got other aldermen, fellow aldermen in the city of Chicago to line up behind his son-in-law, Blagojevich. But since then, Richard Mayo has already said he's not supporting him, not supporting his own son-in-law for re-election. He has another candidate.
Well, how do you see this Cook County Board president situation?
Well, I think that Todd Stroger has made some serious mistakes, very serious mistakes. I do not see him getting re-elected. I think a lot of the criticism of him...
You don't see anybody in the black community that would run against Todd Stroger?
Well, I doubt very much that any black person will succeed Todd. Forrest Claypool, I watched him the other night. He was asked on Chicago Tonight, just 2 nights ago, if he was planning to run for Cook County Board president again. And he said that he will be making a public announcement in a few months. Of course, he's planning to run. And Todd Stroger has not helped his case at all by some of the, there's no other way of saying it, dumb stuff that he has done.
Now, you know, all those things you say are interesting, but I know you got Carol Moseley Braun still out there and Roland Burrs still out there. Why are they so far out the picture? Is that something by their choice?
Well, they have gone into a semi-retirement or virtual retirement.
Bruce, I have
both
to
of
ask
them.
you, we preserving the right to vote for whom?
For you.
No, I
And
mean,
me.
who we going to vote for when we preserve the right to vote?
Well, I think,
Because if the
you know, I
scenario he's
think we
drawing
have
here
to do...
now, I don't know about this.
Well, I think the scenario that he's laid means that we're wide open to new leadership.
Yeah, I think
I
there
mean,
will be...
That's what it sounds like to me. If Emil Jones is going to appoint to the next United States
Well,
Senator,
Blagojevich will appoint him, but
Well,
on Emil's recommendation.
I remember Emil Jones, he gave birth to the Committee to Preserve Voting Rights because in 1980, we were suing as plaintiffs Mike Madigan, and at that time I believe it was Phil Rock, who was the president of the Senate,
right?
Because they were racially gerrymandering the black and Hispanic community, and limiting the number of seats in the state house and in the Senate for blacks and Hispanics. And Emil Jones fought against us tooth and nail, went all the way to the Supreme Court supporting that black people and Hispanics be limited in their numbers. So it is really paradoxical that he ended up becoming the president of the Senate. And now he has picked the last...
And now he's a kingmaker.
Yeah, he's picked the last United States Senator, and looks like, according to Nate, he's probably going to pick the next United States Senator.
Well, it's because of the problems that Blagojevich faces, and his one friend and staunch ally was Emil. And so if Emil requests that Raul, he has nurtured Raul just like he nurtured Obama. You know, it's an interesting story. When Obama went to the...
interesting story, because we got 1 minute.
Well, let me tell this right quick, if possible. When Obama went to the Illinois Senate as a freshman, Obama obviously was very ambitious. He went up to Emil and he said, "Emil, I heard you got a lot of power." Emil looked at him and said, "Young man, what kind of power you think I got?" And Obama said, "I hear you got the power to make a U.S. senator." And Emil said, "No kidding." He said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you some assignments, and then we can talk about that later." So he gave Obama some of the toughest assignments in terms of pushing certain pieces of legislation, and it angered the more veteran black lawmakers down in Springfield. They were jealous. But Emil saw this potential in Obama and gave him some tough assignments, which he came through on in a very great fashion. And so Emil, indeed, Obama was seeking a political godfather when he went. Emil proved to be the right person, and Emil did indeed help launch his presidential campaign.
And the rest may be history, and we are coming to a close. And again, I want to end on the final note that whatever happens with the economy, the election, the ecology, the survival and development of the human race has got to be a priority. And those other things can be of some concern, but they cannot be the major or the center of our focus if we are to continue to have these kinds of discussions.